I have white, and I'll start with the e4 pawn. He quickly plays e6, the French defense. I play d4, he plays d5. Now there are several variations, the advanced variation, the exchange variation, or protection. I've already shown you the advanced variation, so here we'll go with protection. Knight c3, he plays knight f6, attacking that e4 pawn again. I could choose to exchange or advance, but I have to make a decision because he's attacking this pawn twice after all. So I'll decide to advance to e5. He plays knight d7, and now you see he's going for the c5 push. He's looking for that lever. So I'll play knight to e2, even if it blocks my bishop, to free up the c2 pawn so it can go to c3 and consolidate this pawn chain. Because for me, what's interesting in the position is the presence of my e5 pawn, which hampers his pieces a bit and takes the space advantage. So he'll try to destroy d4 to weaken e5. And you see, he's starting, there are already 2 attacks. And soon queen b6 to attack a 3rd time. Also attacking b2, so the bishop has trouble coming to defend. But here, I'll have knight f3 coming to defend. I can also play f4, then knight to f3. In fact, that's what I'll do, f4 then knight to f3. I'm creating this very solid structure on black squares. He plays queen b6, knight f3, so you see he attacks d4 3 times, I defend 4 times. He takes, I retake, maybe he'll go for bishop b4 check. Bishop b4 check, I can play bishop d2 eventually. In case of a trade, retake with the queen and defend the position. I don't know if I might even start playing king f2 actually. It might be dangerous to put myself in his queen's line of sight. The d4 pawn will be pinned. I've seen positions where black ends up playing f6, taking on e5, and if taken, retaking with the knight, and if taken again, retaking with the knight without the d4 pawn retaking. It might seem strange that I'm thinking of this king f2 move, but it's to ultimately neutralize the dark squared bishop, maybe even push it back afterwards. But I think it's better here to play bishop d2. So I'm going to play bishop d2. Bishop takes, d1 takes. There. If we look at the bishops on white squares, it's true mine is hampered by the knight, but it's worse for him. Because even if his knight moves, he has the obstacle of the e6 pawn. So for me, how to solve the development of my light squared bishop? The knight will have to move. If the knight moves, the d4 pawn is no longer very well protected. But it's still sufficiently protected anyway. I can start playing knight c3. I'll play knight c3 to give the d3 square to my bishop. If he does knight takes d4, knight takes d4, queen takes, I'll have bishop takes h7 check, and I take his queen after. You see, it's an indirect defense, bishop d3. Maybe the bishop masks my queen's defense of the d4 pawn. But in reality, and I'm going to play it by the way, in reality there's always a defense. Because after knight takes, queen takes, his queen is unprotected against mine and my bishop can move with check. It's a classic trap that you need to know. In fact, he plays g6, he knows it. And now he's going to start taking on d4. The threat is real. That's annoying. Listen, I'm going to play bishop b5 under the protection of my knight, freeing my queen and my knight, which protect d4. Why am I going to play that? He just played g6. He just weakened all the dark squares on his king side, while he himself has a light squared bishop. So he doesn't have a bishop of the color that could defend the dark squares. So I'm going to use my light squared bishop on b5, maybe at some point to exchange it for the knight on c6 and have 2 knights that could potentially occupy the dark squares on his king side against only one to defend them, since the light squared bishop won't be able to defend them. So I play bishop b5. It allows my knight and my queen to defend d4 well and to be able to exchange the light squared bishop for the knight at any time and have 2 knights plus the queen to try to sneak onto the dark squares while his light squared bishop won't be able to defend them. You see, my goal will be to prevent him from being able to use his white square bishop and to play on the black squares. He just played queen c7. So do I do kingside castling now? I don't want to take the knight right away because he can take back with the pawn and have the a6 square and the bishop will still end up annoying me. But I have to secure my king, so I'm thinking about kingside castling. But another move, to be honest, catches my eye. It's the move h4, with the intention of playing h5, taking on g6 and opening the file for my rook. On h4, he might play h5 himself to block. We'll have to look at g4. To destroy pawn takes, knight g5, to then play h5, it can lead to an attack. Come on, let's try to do that. h4, I'm sending the h-pawn to hack away at his castling. He plays b6. He's going to try to play bishop a6 himself. h5, I want to open this h-file. He plays bishop a6, as expected. And now I think I'm actually going to do bishop takes knight. Take this knight so that this knight can't come back to defend squares on the king side. Sure, he'll have this diagonal, but at most my king stays there, or will come to f2, or will do queenside castling, I don't know. But in any case, his bishop of white squares only has this diagonal and doesn't do much after that. So I take on g6. He takes back with the f-pawn to open the file and attack f2. Now, there's knight g5, which is interesting. Attacks h7 twice and puts pressure on e6 so that the queen doesn't move much. Knight g5, he can't play h6 because rook takes. Knight g5, he can't play rook f7 because knight takes. So knight g5, he'll play h5, I think. And maybe g4. Pawn takes. The queen goes to h2 and threatens queen h7 mate. And even queen h8 mate, since the knight controls it. All right, let's play like that. Knight g5, look, I'm attacking the h7 pawn twice. And the idea is if the pawn goes to h5, I'll play g4 to destroy that pawn and clear the second rank so the queen can join the attack on the h-file. It's true I haven't castled, but for now the center is closed. Look at these blockages in the center, so he can't reach my king yet. And I'm attacking his violently. He's defending laterally like that, but the knight is in the way for now. So I'm thinking about rook takes h7. All right, I don't have much time. I'll do rook takes h7. If his knight moves, I can even take the rook on a7 now. But my queen needs to get there, so maybe g4 to have this h2 square. All right, g4. He played b5 to play b4 himself. He wants to chase my knight away. Now, I'm even looking at rook h8 check, king takes, queen h2 check. King g7 and I enter on h7, and I'm even going to mate him. All right, rook h8, I'll enter on h2 and go mate him directly. I want to enter with a check on the h-file so as not to give him time to oppose it. He can play king g7 maybe. And then I'll have to go back to h7 and eventually play queen h2. He doesn't have to take my gift. Because you see, on king takes rook, queen h2 check, he has to move to the g-file and I enter to mate. And yet that's what's happening. He should have refused my gift and come to g7. And there we go, we have the mate, thanks to the opening of the h-file. All right, new game, white plays e4, and I'm going to play the Sicilian defense with c5 myself. He plays knight f3, I'll play d6, I prevent the pawn from advancing to e5. He plays bishop b5 check, and I don't know how I'm going to defend, actually. I'll defend with my knight, let's see, knight d7. Knight f6, I'm attacking his central pawn, even though his knight is defending. He plays d3, he opens the diagonal for the other bishop, and we have an opponent who's developing very correctly. There's no problem with his development. As for me, I'll have to develop as well. I don't want to play e5, because if I play e5, I create a hole in my position. He could play bishop g5 afterwards, pin my knight and enter on d5, you see? So I'll play e6, I'll be more modest, I'll control this central square to develop on e7 and do kingside castling. There, he succeeded in his development. I've also succeeded in mine. He still has a small advantage with this pawn in the center, but it's fine for me. I can put the question to his bishop with a 6. What does he want to do? Does he want to exchange or retreat? I don't know. I'm also looking at this d5 push, which threatens d4. d5. Pawn takes. Pawn takes. The bishop protects. The knight as well. I can look to play d4 after. Why not? But I don't know. Maybe question his bishop. I don't even know if it's good to question his bishop. But I'm going to do it. We'll see. For now, there hasn't been any imbalance. No piece exchanges, no pawns. It's hard to come up with plans when there's no imbalance. I'm going to have to start creating imbalances or ask him to create some. So if he plays bishop takes knight, there's going to be an imbalance. I'll be the only one with a bishop of white squares. So I'll need to activate my bishop of white squares, maybe recapture with the bishop, put it on c6, look for the d5 push to open the white squares diagonal, things like that. On the other hand, if he retreats to a 4, I haven't caught his bishop of white squares. I can play b5, he can retreat to b3. And I can't play a 5 because there will be knight takes b5. And on a 4, he'll still have the c4 square. Maybe d5, actually. I still need to calculate. Anyway, that's it. We have an imbalance. So I'll put the bishop on this diagonal and look to open the diagonal. But he himself is contesting the dark squares, and he's right because he has one more piece than me to play on the dark squares. So each will try to fight on their own color. So I take on d4. He recaptures with the knight. He's opened this file, but the d6 pawn is protected by the bishop on e7. So even if the knight moves, the d6 pawn is safe for now. If I play bishop c6, he might start taking. Nevertheless, we can do it. Knight takes brings my pawn closer to the center. Anyway, I don't see how to play on light squares. He can even start playing f3 and solidify everything with his pawn structure. I don't see what role I'll give my light squared bishop in the position. And what if I play e5 with the idea that on knight f5, I play bishop takes, pawn takes, and then I push d5? He'll play bishop g5, probably because he's wanting to take my knight at some point, and then try to win the pawn on d5 as well. You see, after e5, then knight f5, and then bishop takes, and finally pawn takes. d5. I'll have the two pawns here, but my pawn is attacked twice, protected twice, but I'd be afraid of bishop g5. I can play d4 anyway, attacking his knight. It could be interesting, but right now I don't know. I'm looking to see if I have anything else. I can place the rook on the file quietly as well, but on this e5 push, I'm coming back to it because if the knight doesn't come to f5, I'll have the bishop on e6. And this d5 square, I'll control it twice. But well, even after e5, the knight moves, bishop e6, he'll surely play bishop g5 anyway. To take this knight and then try to establish himself on the d5 square. So now I don't know. Look, I really don't know. Maybe I'll just play the rook on the file. I'll see what he's going to do as well, you know. He plays f4. And so now I go back to a5. Then I take, and after that, knight f5. Let me just pause here for a moment. This player is playing quite well. He plays fast and he plays quite well, huh? And now, what about rook takes knight? The exchange sacrifice. I trade the rook for the knight, I destroy his pawn structure, and I win the e4 pawn. And my bishop will be able to establish itself much better on this diagonal. I think it's a move that will surprise him. I'm going to go for the exchange sacrifice. It might be a bit ambitious, but here I'm completely demolishing his structure on the queen side and in the center. And I have the pair of bishops. So yes, I'm down a rook, it's true, but I have the pair of bishops. I just won the central pawn. I'm attacking the c3 pawn. He has weak pawns around here. It could still be interesting, we'll see. In any case, it's going to liven up the game. Now, I wanted imbalances, and I've certainly got them, huh? He comes there, he defends. If the bishop moves, I'll have a problem with the knight. He's also defending the g3 square. He's found a good defensive square, huh? Maybe queen c7 to increase the pressure on his pawn on c3. Careful, my knight isn't protected. It's a hanging piece, and that's always dangerous. I have to be careful that there aren't any attacks on my knight at some point, you know. But here I'm attacking c3. He can play bishop d2 to attack my knight and defend c3 twice, to which I can take his black square bishop, right? Bishop d2, knight takes, queen takes, and maybe rook c8 to keep attacking the c3 pawn. If I manage to win 2 pawns, it'll be interesting. He plays bishop f2, so he's leaving me this pawn on c3. But I'd really like to take his dark squared bishop too. But if I take his dark squared bishop and he takes back with the rook, I haven't won c3. Knight takes c3. What has he planned next? I don't know. My knight is well placed. It controls the d1 and b1 squares. His rook won't be able to do much. It puts pressure on a 2. I'm going to play knight takes c3 anyway. Maybe some bishop f6 ideas as well. On the diagonal, creating a bishop face-off with his rook, as his rook doesn't have many squares if you look closely. He puts the bishop on g3 and creates a bishop-queen face-off. You see, always look at the face-offs. Now, I'm thinking about queen c5, creating a queen-king face-off. And if he protects, queen takes knight, and two forks, and I win his queen. So on queen c5, he could play bishop f2, but I could move my queen again. Let's test a bit what he has planned for queen c5 and this pin. Maybe he'll play queen e3 to protect his knight while attacking mine. But you see on queen e3, I could do queen takes d4 and the fork, but he played bishop f2. He came back here. So I think I'll wisely go back to c7. Now, if he plays bishop g3, I'll change my move. I'll play bishop f6. I tested him a bit. He didn't fall for my trap. He plays knight b3. Let's not forget he has no white squared bishop. So bishop b5 and I trap his rook here. That's interesting. I win the exchange. You see, always try to play with the pieces your opponent doesn't have. I have a white squared bishop. He doesn't. I must focus on the white squares. He plays bishop d4 and he's attacking my knight, by the way. But I can do knight e2 check, take his bishop and then take his rook. Because he attacked my knight twice. I take his bishop, his rook remains under attack. There I take his rook. And now bishop f6, I attack the knight and the rook. He plays c3, but queen takes c3. His knight is under attack, and if the knight moves, I can take the rook unless the knight comes to b3 to defend. That's what he should play, actually. Knight b3 to defend the rook. But since I'm many pawns up, I'll play d5, and he ended up resigning because it's true that he has attacks on the knight, he has attacks on the rook, and I have many pawns. I have 3 more pawns than him. It's starting to get heavy. So what is my opponent going to play against me? He starts with the pawn on e4. I'll play d6. Let's see. I'll play the Perk defense. It's a fairly rare defense that consists of blocking the advance of the pawn to f5. Well, if it advances, I could exchange it. And then be able to play knight f6 to attack the central pawn. So I'll force the opponent to defend. But you see, he played too fast. He doesn't defend. He played d4 immediately. So I'm going to take this pawn. So yes, I win a central pawn. It's an important gain nonetheless, but it's at the expense of my development. Because he'll be able to play bishop d3, attack my knight, almost castling. See, he'll have a central pawn, a knight, a bishop out, the king. It can be dangerous. And he plays bishop c4. He's pointing out the weakness of my pawn on f7. A pawn that is poorly protected in chess openings. Only the king defends. But I'll be able to play d5. Protected by the queen, it protects my knight and pushes back his bishop. I think he should have played bishop d3 instead, you see? Well, he can start playing bishop d3 now, but the difference is that my knight will be protected. So he didn't really take advantage of his lead in development. So how am I going to continue the game? Certainly once he saved his bishop, moves like bishop g4 the pin, then playing e6 so as not to leave my c8 bishop locked behind my structure, freeing my dark squared bishop with this e6 push. He plays bishop b3, and you see bishop g4, the pin the knight can no longer move. Now I'm going to play e6, and when you play e6, you open up the dark squared bishop. It's not to go for checks, he could play c3. Opening the dark squared bishop will serve to support the c5 push, using the wing pawn in the fight for the central square. But as you can see, he just played h3, questioning my bishop. And here I'm going to play a little color game with him. I'm going to take his knight. I know I no longer have a white square bishop, and I'm going to solidify on the light squares to then take the fight to the dark squares. For example, here I'll play e6, freeing my dark squared bishop, which will support the c5 push. And I'll keep this pawn structure to block the diagonals of his light squared bishop. Now he might be able to give me some checks. Right now it doesn't work because of c6, but once I've played c5, he could play bishop f4 check. But it's not that bad. Knight c6, if he takes, I retake with the pawn. I'll have doubled pawns, but since the c5 pawn is in conflict with the d4 pawn, it can undouble at any time. And so I play c5. And I'm not afraid of bishop a4. Now I'm not threatening to trap his bishop, by the way. If I play c4, he'll have bishop f4 check anyway. What I want is to destroy the d4 pawn, destroy this center pawn. Followed by knight c6, he takes c5 immediately. I could retake with the knight. It would attack his bishop and control the f4 square so the bishop can't check me. but I think it's better to develop the black square bishop and prepare for kingside castling. Look at this bishop on the black square. It's attacking the pawn on f2 with the knight. So the rook can't move, otherwise the pawn on f2 will be taken, you see. He plays knight d2, coming right away to attack my knight. Then here I think I'm just going to take... All right, I'm taking. He can still throw in a check, but knight d7, knight c6, it's no big deal. And now I'm going to do kingside castling. I'm still a pawn up. And in terms of piece differences, he has this white square bishop that I don't, but you can see it has no influence. Still, for me, if I want to win, I'll have to give a role to the knight, which is the piece he doesn't have. Here he plays queen g3. What does he want to do? He actually wants to play bishop h6. He's creating a face-off against my king. My g7 pawn will be pinned, he'll threaten mate, and if I play g6, he'll take my rook. However, bishop h6 doesn't work because I can play queen f6. I protect g7, I attack his bishop, I counterattack on b2. So I'm not afraid of this bishop arriving on h6, and I'll be able to continue my development, knight c6. Bishop h6, queen f6. He could put his bishop on g5, attack my queen. I could go take the b2 pawn or play queen g6. It's not a problem. See, he can play bishop g5 to attack my queen, so I'll either take the pawn on b2, which gives me 2 extra pawns, or I play queen g6 to pin his bishop. Well, his bishop could move, but it would force a queen trade. Now, he won't be able to take back with the pawn. Look at the pin on the pawn on f2. There will be many pins, so I'm going to play it actually. I'll play queen g6. I'm threatening h6, and the bishop should probably go to h4 or f4 to protect the queen, because if the bishop goes too far, queen takes g3, pawn takes, won't be possible because of the bishop-king alignment. But it's true that I could have just taken the pawn on b2. That might have actually been the best move. I'm being a bit of a tease here. I'm pushing things a little too far. What other moves do I have? If I want to give my knight a roll, I have knight d4 and knight e2, the royal fork. But as you can see, he just played c3. Not only does he take that square away from my knight, but he also wants to give his bishop a roll. Once he's played rook c1, for example, to put his bishop on the diagonal to attack my queen. That's interesting. I'll play h6. We'll see where his bishop goes. Don't forget I have the threat of queen takes queen if his bishop isn't there, and he can't take back with the pawn because of the pin. So he either plays bishop e3, or he plays bishop h4, or he plays bishop f4. Those are the 3 possible moves. Actually, bishop e3 won't work. I take his queen, he takes back with the pawn, and I take his bishop. I win a pawn with a check. No, I don't just win a pawn, I win a piece. I win his bishop, sorry. So bishop e3 isn't possible. Queen takes queen, pawn takes bishop, check. I win his bishop. So he only has bishop h4 or bishop f4. There's no choice. After all, those are good moves for him. He can play those. I'll just be up a pawn. But an extra pawn can make all the difference, especially if we transition into an endgame. As soon as the queens are traded, the game calms down. We often transition into an endgame simply because there are fewer mating attacks. He plays bishop c2, and so if I take his bishop on c2, he'll play bishop takes h6. Thanks to the pin. But actually, it's not even a big deal. I could go back to g6. But above all, the problem is that he's leaving me the bishop on g5. So I'll take the bishop on g5. Either way, I could have taken either of the 2 bishops, but I might as well take this dark squared bishop, which was more threatening to my kingside castling. And I'm still threatening queen takes queen. The pawn can't take back. He trades, but now he's down a pawn and a piece. By the way, it's interesting regarding the minor pieces. We don't have the same pieces at all. I have a dark squared bishop, he doesn't. He has a light squared bishop, I have a knight, he doesn't. So I really need to work on the black squares, actually, because if I work on the black squares, I have 2 pieces to work with and he has none to defend them. And what's the most important pawn for him? It's the f2 pawn. It's the pawn that defends the dark squares on the king side. So I'd like him to play f3 or f4 at some point, and my knight will try to get closer to find, for example, the fork on g3. We're going to start maneuvering with this knight to try and reach some good fork squares, but for now I don't see how he could do it. We'll wait for him to move his pawn. There he played king h1 to unpin himself. He wants to move his pawn. We'll wait for him to move his pawn, and we'll try to smash this little dark square defense by playing b5 and b4. Because if the c3 pawn is gone, the knight will have access to the square to attack the bishop, maybe after knight e2, knight g3, the fork. He plays f4, you see, he plays this f4 move all by himself. Well, I'll take his pawn. He takes back with the rook, and I'll play b4. I'm protecting twice. So if he takes, I'm able to take back, probably with the knight. If he plays rook f1, he's not threatening to take on f7. The king and rook defend. He plays h4. All right, I'll take c3, trying to weaken the structure. He can't put his king on h2 anymore because of bishop d6, the pin. We're going to take control of the file to penetrate onto the second rank. He plays h5. All right, I'm going into b2, attacking his bishop. He goes to d3. All right, I'll be a bit cheeky. I'll play rook d2, attacking his bishop again. We're going to harass his bishop, which is actually well placed on the diagonal. He retreats to b1 now, but his rook is actually trapped. I could play, for example, bishop a3 and bishop b2. But rook d1 check is good because on king h2, he moves to a dark square. And as I told you, the dark square bishop d6. I had ways to catch his rook with bishop d6 or bishop a3, bishop b2. You see, there were several ways to snag his rook. I don't know which is best, but I played this one anyway. So he plays g3. I'll grab that rook. Oh, wait, he can play bishop h7 check and pick up my rook. The little rascal, I'll play king h8 on a dark square, so he can't do that discovered attack. And that way his bishop can't move anymore, or he loses the rook. And of course, I'll play rook b8 and we'll eliminate that bishop. Rook b8, and I think resignation is quite close for my opponent now, especially since he has very little time left. We'll go ahead and take that rook away from him, just to be sure. I could have also taken back with the other rook, but it's the same anyway. It'll be just as strong. He takes. He plays the pawn here, so I take. As I move away, this pawn now has a completely clear and direct path, an open road straight to promotion with nothing blocking its way. So what we're going to do next is head over together and work on making a new queen, starting fresh and building something new from here. He plays h6 while I can take that pawn, but I don't even have to. I'll bring my knight closer. If he takes, I'll retake. I'm not worried about one pawn now. It's easy. And there we go. He's out of time. I wish you a good rest of your day. Feel free to leave comments. I read them all. Share the video and support the channel. Goodbye, everyone.